Welcome to today's presentation brought to you by the Life Sciences team here at ReadTech. Today's topic is unique device identification for medical devices, and specifically the current guidance for requirements and exemptions for the US FDA Class I data submission date, which is now set for December 8th of this year. This meeting is being recorded and all audience members are muted. We do encourage questions, so please submit them at any time using the chat box. We will cover as many as possible during the Q&A at the end. If you're having issues hearing the audio through your computer, try calling the phone number listed in the email invite or on the screen by clicking on the phone icon. The slides and video link will be sent out to all registrants after this live presentation. We are so pleased to introduce our panelists for today's talk. Gary Saner. Hi, Gary.
Hello, how are you doing, Sam?
So good, so good. I'm so happy to be here with both of you. Gary Saner is their Senior Manager of Information Solutions at ReadTech. Gary is a subject matter expert on medical device, unique device identification, and other structured content reporting to regulatory agencies and commercial organizations. He has over 30 years of experience in software development, process management, and data administration, with the last 15 years focused on the life sciences industry. He serves as chair of the industry's structured product labeling technical team and on the advisory board of the medical devices group. And we have Linda. Hi, Linda.
How are you today, Sam?
I'm doing great, great. So happy to be here with you. Linda Morehouse is an account executive in our medical devices group. She is a RAP certified UDI global compliance expert with many years of experience helping medical device organizations implement a sustainable and cost-effective UDI solution. I'm Sam Page, and I'm here with the marketing team here at ReadTech. Here's a little background about ReadTech. We are industry experts with over 18 years of SPL knowledge. We have submitted over 750,000 SPLs to FDA Good ID and over 5,000 records to EU UDIMED. We have submitted about 34% of overall Good ID SPL records, and we are the trusted partner to more than 455 medical device customers. For our agenda today, we will cover UDI definition and goal, FDA UDI requirements, FDA UDI Class I requirement, exceptions, planning your UDI strategy for the US and global market, FDA Good ID compliance, submission and maintenance, and how ReadTech can help. And now I will let Gary take the wheel.
All right, well, thank you, Sam. And Linda and I are excited about covering this topic. It's an ongoing conversation. Just when you think you had things all figured out, you know, there's a little bit of a change here. There's a timing change. There's a scope change. Some regulations and guidance documents come out. So anyway, we're pleased to share the latest and greatest from the FDA and how you might put a strategy together to complete all that. There's some deadlines coming up just a few months away, so we'll have to make sure all the ducks are lined up to meet those compliance deadlines. We're glad to help you. So for the topics today, Sam mentioned about the UDI definition and goals, and this is a little bit of a background, certainly for those that have been working with the US FDA requirements for UDI. And you might have already submitted thousands and tens of thousands of records for your Class 3s and Class 2s, and perhaps you're very far ahead on your Class 1s. But we have found that there's a number of companies that are approaching UDI for the first time. They might only manufacture Class 1s, and we're in a limbo mode with some direction waiting for the FDA to come out and give them some guidance. So we're going to do a quick little recap. I'm going to move through it quickly. If you have questions, you know, do a little bit of homework on the downloaded slides or contact us for more information. But as a real quick recap, we get the question right up front from anyone approaching UDI conversation early on, what the heck is this UDI? Well, to answer that, it is a identifier that is good for all time and good for all regions. And it's created by the product owner, and it's comprised of two components. The first component is always present. That would be the device identifier. And there's some codes there. I'm going to use GS1 in this example as the standard to illustrate the various components of a UDI. But there's a code that identifies not only the company, but also would point to a particular product version down into the actual model version. And it also has some information about the packaging level. The second component, the production identifier, is conditional. It may not be there, or it might have up to 4 different attributes: manufacturing date, expiration date, lot, or serial number. And if they are present on the label, then they need to be included in the UDI. So if you put these two parts together, the device identifier is always first, and if you have a production identifier, it follows, and it could be quite lengthy. So if we were to build it from the examples that I have there, in red would be the device identifier, followed by the production identifier. Now there is some additional characters that you see down there. There's parentheses 01 and parentheses 11 and so on. Those are codes established by GS1 as flags to indicate that there's a particular value that follows. So that is added to identify those particular values, and good for interpretation. With that, let's go over to the goals. And again, the question is, what is UDI, but why is it, did the FDA move forward with this? Real high level, it would improve, the intent is to improve safety of your medical devices in use by downstream patients and caregivers. So there is a number of ways in which the FDA attacked that. They have some information about making sure the device is able to be identified. They want to reduce errors and improve the safety surveillance studies and so on. And also part of this approach in this initiative was to make data available and make it very visible to the public. So in the FDA's particular scenario, they build a global database referred to the Global UDI Database, nicknamed GoodID. And this was has its roots going back to 2013. This is the final rule for the UDI that was rolled out in September 24, 2013. When you take a look at the implementation and the use, you might, as a manufacturer, only see one deliverable. You have this responsibility to report information to the health authority, not only for your product approval and for marketing approval, but the reporting of UDI needs to go to a health authority database. That data is also, many times, part of it is included on the actual physical label of the product. So in the lower stream, we see data going to the actual purchasers. So it might be your distributors, group purchasing organization, retailers, and other trading partners and so on. So there's an avenue of information flowing to the FDA, and a second avenue going out to your actual product logistics and supply channel. And then we've identified multiple layers. You are able to see multiple implementations or ways to illustrate this, but we identified the second wave as data processors, those organizations that pull data maybe from various places, pull it together, make it available. Sometimes they have a subscription out to electronic health network. So when I go to the doctor, there's an electronic health record, and they open up a tablet and click through a piece of software. Well, that information, many times those software products will have information that the data aggregators have pulled together. And then moving further down various waves, the actual healthcare providers and the patients, actual downstream users. There's some other organizations such as payers, reimbursements, insurance companies and so on, interested in making sure the identification is correct and much more granular than before. And there's traceability and registries that include information. So if there's a hip joint that I might have needed to have implanted. So I now have a registry with my name and a particular version and model of a manufactured hip joint. So that is very valuable in the event there's recalls and to support data mining and so on. So the point is that the data that you supply, and you think it's only 1 point, take care of my regulatory requirements, send it to the FDA, and make sure it's on the label. There's actually a whole industry behind that. So one of the things that we want to make sure is to have high quality data and make sure it's timely, make sure it's as comprehensive as necessary, and realize that what you put in place is viewed by many different downstream users. Now, I'm going to cover the general requirements for UDI, and they're quite broad and would cover all the classes. And then Linda will focus in on some of the exceptions for Class 1s, and there's a whole host of exceptions. In true FDA form, they put together all kinds of special rule here, special case there. If you meet the criteria, you can do this, and so on. So Linda's going to walk our way through that. But before we get to the exceptions, we need to understand the broad UDI platform and what are the requirements. We've put together a quadrant of 4 different areas. And the first upper left quadrant has to do with identification of the actual product. So UDI needs to be placed on the product and packaging labels in the full UDI, meaning the device ID and the production ID. And it needs to be presented in text as well as what the FDA referred to as automatic ID and data capture. So you'll hear people talk about AIDC. For the most part, predominantly that is implemented as a 1-dimensional or a 2-dimensional barcode, and that's very commonplace. Technically you could have a radio frequency ID, but very few products actually implement that. As part of the UDI rule, there was another aspect that applied to the label, and that was the date format. So one of the things that the FDA had noticed is that many companies use the year and the month only, but never put the exact date for manufacturing or expiration date. So it's kind of unrelated to UDI, but it was rolled up in the package or part of the rule. And one of the things that you need to check when you implement and comply with UDI, in the event you do have dates on your label, it needs to be of this format: year dash month dash day. Now, there is no requirement to add that date if you don't already have a manufacturing expiration date. It's just saying that if you use a date format, it must be this particular style. A subset of all medical devices fall into this category that need an additional level of identification referred to as direct marking. And the criteria is very specific. It actually evolved over the course of time, but the FDA ended up with this definition for the criteria. One, that it be for different patients, multiple use. And secondly, is that it must be reprocessed. And the FDA's interpretation and explanation of what that really means, it would be high-level disinfection and or sterilization. So an example would be like a surgical scalpel, where it's used on multiple patients. Between patients, it goes down to a sterilization department or somewhere, usually on premises. They clean and sterilize that scalpel, make it ready for the next surgery. That particular product falls into this category, and therefore many companies would direct market. Technology is up to them how they accomplish that, and in some cases they use laser etching to get that full UDI on the product. We'll move over to the third quadrant. The third quadrant has to do with reporting of information to the FDA's Good ID database. So this database is actually copied and made available to the public by the National Library of Medicine in something called the Access Good ID. And there's a number of attributes. customers or manufacturers submit 47. The FDA looks up and derives some more attributes and ends up with about 64 total attributes. But there's a lot of information, and this is the information that many data aggregators pull down, they download, and make available to other downstream users. A lot of information about the product. And sometimes it's quite difficult to find that information. So it's usually stored in different locations. It was never really assembled before. There was no precedent. So for Class I companies trying to find this, you might find, just as the other Class II and Class III manufacturers, you have to hunt and peck, find it around your organization somewhere, and then make sure that no attributes are omitted, and pull that information together. Make sure it's current, make sure it's accurate, and have a data owner assigned to it. So in the event that it changes, this information is kept up to date. The last quadrant is what I refer to as the forgotten quadrant. Not too many people bring this up, but there are some very specific rules in the final, or very specific requirements in the final rule that have to deal with documentation and handling of UDI records and reports. And the final rule didn't create many of these documents. These are long-standing documents, should be part of your quality management system. So some of your design history records, complaint handling, if you have an adverse event that you become aware of, there's certainly a policy procedure to handle that and report it as necessary, recalls and so on. Basically, in the event you do process a device and UDI is available, the requirement is now that you include UDI as part of that. So make sure you revisit these policies and have UDI identified. All right, so there's some requirements for electronic record handling, 21 CFR Part 11. There's some other policies about retaining records for 3 years after it becomes discontinued off the market. All right, third question we get a lot about UDI is, what is the timing? So we've laid out a lot of history here. Most of this is all in the past. There was the original compliance date for Class I in 2018. The FDA was very concerned about the quality of the previously submitted Class IIs and IIIs. They did receive some feedback from industry saying, hey, there's a lot of fields that are missing here. And they extended the deadline for Class II by 2 years out to 2020, and basically said, please improve, update your Class II and III records over these 2 years. And when you do submit Class Is, make sure they're full, complete records and provide data in a number of different places. And then COVID hit. FDA then had resources dedicated to that. They were certainly aware that industry, the whole paradigm had changed. A lot of people were remote working and not available. So they extended the deadline 2 years out to September. And then recently, there was a draft guidance that extended the Good ID submission date to December of this year. So there's a two-part compliance date. One is to comply with UDI labeling, direct marking, and documentation. That still remains in place of September 24 of this year. But the Good ID for all devices is now pushed back to December 8 of this year. So we'll have some more discussion about the guidance that addressed that extension. It had some other provisions in it as well. So a quick note card for the US FDA. In the upper left, you see some events. We won't go into all the details there, but we'll touch on that guidance document that came out in July. Then the compliance date, I just mentioned September 24 and December 8, down in the bottom left is the two outstanding deadlines. On the right, there's just a quick, somewhat cryptic description of the approach the FDA has put together. Now, in the appendix, there's a number of other regions. We won't go into that. We don't have time today, but similar note cards are available for EU, South Korea, China, Australia, and Saudi Arabia in the appendix. So certainly go ahead and download that. With that, Linda, do you want to start go over some of the exceptions for the Class Is?
That sounds great. All right. So Gary went through all of these different requirements. What we're going to do now is just talk about how Class I devices are impacted by these and some exceptions that are available, starting with the labeling. So if you are a Class I manufacturer, it is completely acceptable to use UPC as your UDI on your label. And as Gary said, sometimes there's no production identifier that's required. That is the case for Class I UPC devices. Additionally, if you use a UPC as your label, you are also exempted from direct marking on your products. Now, the third quadrant addresses the global UDI database, and it addresses the draft guidance that had come out in October of 2021 and then was finalized, like Gary said, on July 25th, which confirms that if you are a Class I device manufacturer and you only sell your devices over the counter to consumers direct, then good ID reporting or mandating that you put the information into the global UDI database is no longer required. However, like Gary said, you still must identify your product with the UDI and put it on your label. The last exception we'll be talking about deals with Class I devices that are GMP exempt, good manufacturing practice exempt. So we're going to do a deeper dive into each of these individually on the next screen. Starting with the Class I devices that are GMP or good manufacturing practices exempt. So we're often asked the question, how do I determine whether or not my product meets the GMP exemption or not? So what we did is under the criteria, you'll see that live link. It says Class I with GMP exemption. That is a live link. You click in there and you're brought to the FDA product code classification database. There you're able to enter either a device description, and in the example below, we used mechanical walker, or you can use the 3-letter production code or product code, and that would be ITJ. Either one of those, you would enter that information, about what you're looking up, and it will bring you to this information here. And it provides valuable information about the device product code that it's associated with, including whether or not your device, what the status of the GMP of your device is. So in this case, if I sell mechanical walkers, they are in fact exempt from, they are GMP exempt. Therefore, there is no UDI requirement. However, I will tell you that there are many manufacturers who voluntarily decide that they want to submit that information to receive the many benefits that are available by having their information publicly available. Gary, can you speak to some of those?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Even though mechanical walkers are exempt from Good ID, there's over 100 already listed in the FDA Good ID. And that's a voluntary submission. So it's not necessarily, it turns out to be a business decision. It's not a regulatory decision. It's now a business decision. And I'm going to go ahead and submit that. So remember, we were looking at a graphic earlier that showed many downstream users that use this information that comes from the Good ID. And it's used in some cases for, managing the product. It might be used by downstream users to locate a product, to find a product that they want to buy, or maybe they want to review what's available and do price comparisons. Or another scenario might be if there's a shortage of the current product that they're buying, they want to buy a replacement and keep a product available. So there's a number of different reasons: price, location, or price comparison. just identifying the price, who manufactures this product, and alternatives. So if those products are listed there, they become part of the review and examination by one of your potential customers. If you're not in the good ID, and good ID is used for purposes, you're not on the list. You're not even considered. It's like your product's not available, or not even known to potential customers. So it's for that reason, I think, just to be comprehensive, and these companies might have other products that are in, and they just want to make sure all their products are registered with the good ID. And sometimes there is a deliberate business decision that says, you know what, I want to be included there to be evaluated by potential future customers. So Linda, I think we are ready for the next one. Let me go to the next slide. And
Absolutely. I'll just
next exception.
add a little bit to yours. What I did here, and from customers when we were going through the pandemic, there were some Class I devices that were hard to get a hold of, and they were, some of the customers or clients that I spoke to were using the good ID in order to find some of those supplies. So it is very relevant to industry currently. So yes, now we're going to go on to some additional exceptions. So the next exception for Class I products deals with the production identifier. So as Gary showed you and spoke about earlier, the UDI, or unique device identification, is composed of two parts: the device identifier and the production identifier. If you are a Class I device manufacturer, no production identifier is required in your UDI.
Yeah, that's across the board.
Yes, exactly.
Yep. All right, let's move to the next one.
Okay, so now we move to the next exception, and that's dealing with the UPC. So we've already discussed that the UPC can be used as UDI on your label, and no direct marking would be required. However, it's imperative to note that most Class I manufacturers must still report information on their products directly to the global UDI database. And that date for compliance is coming up just 4 months away, less than 4 months away now, on December 8th. So here we wanted to share an example of a standard label. So this would be a label that would, any, Class 3, 2, 1 product might use. It includes both the device identifier and the production identifiers. Now, if we click to the next slide, we wanted to show you what it would look like if you're a Class I manufacturer and you were just using a UPC code. You'll notice that it's a much smaller, the device identifier is the only portion that's included in the barcode using a UPC. And it's also critical that if you are including any of, or voluntarily including those production identifiers, like Gary said, you must make sure that you are adhering to health authority rules for labeling, and make sure that you record them in the correct format. So the last exception for Class I devices deals with the new FDA final ruling. And, we spoke about, if you're a manufacturer of a Class I device that is sold solely over the counter, then UDI is required in that you must assign a UDI and you must have it on your label. However, those are the small subset of products that it is not required or mandated that you enter your information into the good ID. Now, Gary, if you could spend a little more time, I know this FDA final rule has more qualifications and information that, if you could go into a bit of a deeper dive, that would be helpful.
Yeah, sure. We put together this additional slide that has some detail on that. The current guidance, this is a final guidance, effective immediately. It came out in July 25th, just a few weeks ago, and it was revised. So this is actually a guidance document that goes back a number of years, but the FDA has updated multiple times to include date changes, and it is the very guidance that established those guidance for, or the dates for the Good ID submission of December 8 for Class 1. So this update had multiple components, updating that compliance date for Class 1s. There's actually some conversation and guidance about products that are Class 1 products that are in inventory as of the compliance date and might be liable for direct marking. There's some provisions to provide some kind of an alternate lookup means for that. We won't focus on that conversation right now, but if you have questions, go ahead and contact us on that special rule. But the main part of this guidance for our conversation today has to do with a provision that says Class 1 products that are 510K exempt and sold over the counter. Now, that two-part requirement, the first one is very easy. Almost 90% of all Class 1 products are 510K exempt, so a lot of products fall into that category. And then the second criteria has to do with that it's exclusively sold, directly to customers in over-the-counter environment. And the FDA specifically mentions it may be a brick and mortar store, it might be an online store. So if this product is sold exclusively, for example, to a pharmacy, might be Walgreens, Rite Aid, who knows, might be at Walmart, or if it's online, maybe go to Amazon and buy this product. But if it's sold exclusively, then there's a special provision that allows you not to submit data to the Good ID database. As part of this provision, this exclusion, the FDA rolled out a number of exceptions. So they said this does not apply to something called reserve devices. So basically those 510K, and that was part of the first criteria, so nothing new there. It does not apply to restricted devices. So this would typically be prescription devices. We already said that this would be over the counter, so nothing new there. There is a little clause that says the restricted devices, and there are about 4 or 5 products that fall into this category. Actually, the Vision Council had looked into these other restrictions, one of which happened to be the impact ball test on eyewear, the lenses themselves. And therefore, they were not able to claim this exception. So there's a couple devices in there. I think actually hearing aids, are in this little section as well, and a couple other products. The other noteworthy exception was, though this Good ID exception was not able to be provided to those products that were distributed to healthcare facilities intended to be used by a healthcare professional. And if they were reused or reprocessed or intended for wound care. So a lot of those products that you might be selling to hospitals would not be able to be part of this. And then it also said it did not apply to implantable devices, life-supporting or life-sustaining. I think there's only a handful of product codes that are Class 1 and fall into that category. And then unclassified devices, so they're not able to claim this exemption. They still must report data to the Good ID. So that's a couple of the details in that guidance document. The link is live there, so when you download the information, go ahead and read some details. But to summarize, we've put Class 1 devices into a number of different categories. The first one is those prescription or hospital use, and some of those special scenarios that have falling into this restricted device category. So some examples might be a stethoscope, sunglasses readers, dental tools, hospital bed. They definitely need full UDI and need to report Good ID in December. Linda was talking about, and we just talked a little bit more about these consumer health products that, based on this guidance document that just came out, Maybe it's a humidifier, something called eyeglass frames. It's your dental floss, it's dental pick, your electric toothbrush, pill cutters. Pretty much anything that's used over the counter. No good idea is required, but you still have to make sure you comply with the other UDI requirements. Now, it became clear in the guidance documents, the way it was written, that there are some products that fall in between. They're on the fence row, and they're used in both places. So I go to the doctor, and I get a shot, and they put a Band-Aid on my arm, so they're using Band-Aids. I also go to Rite Aid and buy Band-Aids and scratch or whatever, I put a Band-Aid on. So Band-Aids are marketed in both environments, the hospital professional use as well as totally consumer. If that's the case, if they fall into this borderline, then UDI is required. So you have to be exclusively sold in the consumer health over the counter to claim that exception. And then Linda talked about the fourth quadrant, those very low risk products, and they would be associated with this good manufacturing practice exemption. Now, that's not a 510K exception. We definitely want to be clear. There's something called the 510K exception for your marketing approval, but this is a good manufacturing practice exemption, so it has to do with your quality systems and other types of controls. But the foot brace, the mechanical walkers, canes, scales, and those type of things, you'll find them with a good manufacturing practice exemption, and no UDI is required at all. But again, you want to be able to look at your portfolio and figure out, this is not required, but maybe I want to make a business decision to submit anyway. And you have to make that decision. You're going to save a little bit of effort and time now, or realize the impact of maybe not being included. So whatever is best for your company, but these are the particular guidelines and rules laid out. So I think we're going to move over now to planning a strategy and what kind of approach. Linda, do you have some information here?
I sure do. Thank you, Gary. So what we found is the FDA started implementing their requirements back in 2013. So there are so many organizations who are very familiar and have developed a strategy, but then you have others like your Class I manufacturers that this is all brand new. So they've asked us to provide some guidelines or support in how do you develop a UDI strategy. But I think we're going to go to some poll questions first.
I got you there. Here we go. Let me get this launched. Okay. The first question is, what is your experience with submitting UDI product data to UDI? Please select 1. We have not submitted any Class 2 or 3 and need to submit. We have submitted prior Class 2 or 3 and need to submit Class 1. Or our Class 1 UDI data is already in UDI. Give you a few seconds.
So we'll see if there's some people holding off, waiting for some guidance from the FDA, waiting for the last deadline instruction, and now they're about to embark on UDI.
All right, I'm going to close and share. And it looks like about 62% say they've submitted prior to Class 2 or 3 and need to submit Class 1. So, Gary, you called it.
Right.
We got 19% have not submitted any, and 19% have Class 1 data, UDI data already in UDI.
All right, very good.
Move to our last question. Overall, what sentence accurately reflects how your UDI data is currently managed and how you submit records? Please select 1, a third party and perform some of this work in-house, a third party's SaaS, sales software as a service platform for these services, or we do this work exclusively in-house. A lot of people in-house. All right, go ahead. Oh, People are still chiming in. Okay. So yeah, it looks like 55% do the work exclusively in-house, with 25% having a third party and some of the work in-house, and 20% with a third party's SaaS platform.
Yeah, I imagine that in-house would include perhaps manual entry using the FDA Good Web Interface. It might be a purchase tool that they have installed. So a couple different in-house options there. Very interesting. Okay.
So for many of these, class one, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And right now there are a lot of regulations, not only for the FDA, but if you sell your product globally, that you have to create a strong implementation plan. So for those who are brand new to it, or for those who are looking to expand to other regions, there are 5 key criteria that we would suggest in implementing a very strong UDI program, starting with first defining who on your team will be responsible for UDI compliance. What are their roles and their specific responsibilities? Additionally, you want to make sure you have a very strong understanding of what are the FDA regulations that are pertinent to your specific medical devices. Now, the next stages would be, or steps would be, step 2, data preparation, step 3, good ID submissions, and UDI operations in step 5. You'll see those are highlighted. And the reason is because these are areas where RETEC can be instrumental in helping to support you in your UDI submission compliance efforts. So we can help you to understand the information and all the data attributes that must be collected. And once you collect that information, we can validate it against the business rules of the health authority to make sure it's in the best condition to be submitted to the health authority. This saves you a great deal of time and increases the accuracy of your submissions. Additionally, we would provide you with a UDI template, and then we would train you one-on-one or group training to make sure that you really understand what are these requirements and you know where to find the information. Because you'll find that, like Gary said, some of this information may be readily available within your systems. You may actually have to go outside to get some of this information. You may not have collected it. So additionally, what we're going to do is help you to set up your health authority account, and in this case, setting up a good ID account for the FDA. That requires some tests, and once you've done all that and you're ready, then we can help you electronically submit that information using an ESG, which is an electronic submission gateway, and submit that to the FDA. This again saves a great deal of time, rather than, like Gary said, many might be doing this with a manual entry. That takes an awful lot of resources, and oftentimes it's not cost effective compared to other options that are out there that can do this for you, saving you a great deal of time, increasing your accuracy, and ensuring really good information. From there, once you've made your electronic submissions, we're able to provide the acknowledgements, and one of which is whether or not your information was successfully submitted to the FDA. That's critical because we provide an audit trail so that you have proof of compliance should you have or need to supply that for any internal or external audits. So once you've done that initial implementation, then UDI submissions are ongoing. So you must keep that information up to date. On average, we find that 30 to 38% of your records that you initially submitted need to be updated in year 2 or year 3 of your submission of the next submissions. So this is truly an ongoing process. Additionally, if you sell internationally, being able to reuse this data, and repurpose it for the requirements for UDI in other regions is critical. Lastly, you will also have to make sure that you have, prepared your labeling environment and that you've tested those labels so that they are ready to go out by the September 24th date. Now, when you're looking to get started, what we did is I outlined, when you're looking at the new compliance date for getting your information into the Good ID, that's going to be December 8th. That's under 4 months away. So I set it up in kind of quadrants. We can easily provide support, RETEC can support your UDI records to health authorities, help you to do that before the deadline. We can set up an account with RETEC within 2 business days. We're able to provide you with, company sites, set up within our RETEC system, train you on the data elements, provide you with the RETEC template and system access. Also, make sure you have your health authority or help to set you up for your health authority account with the FDA. Those can be done pretty relatively quickly, and that's very important because the major portion in time is in collecting, importing, and cleansing your data, which we can also, provide the framework and support in making sure that happens seamlessly. But there is information that you may not have collected, so it does take some time. So that's critical. Once you've collected that information, now we're able to really validate it and make sure that it's in the best shape, so that when you do make those submissions, you know that you can, they're going to be in good shape and likely pass have a very high probability of passing the FDA regulations and then be published. And therefore, then you have your audit trail, which is also important for maintaining. Now, while we're doing all that, we're also developing a very robust data management system that we have within our single source, and that is a way for you to maintain all of those records. Gary was talking about compliance requirements, and there's a 3-year time after you discontinue your product where you must retain those records. We're able to provide all of that data management and also meet, like Gary said, the 21 CFR Part 11 technical requirements in the US, as well as Annex 11 technical compliance requirement in the EU. So, if you're looking for any support, we can really, support you very quickly.
So I think I'll cover some best practices. No matter which particular method you use, we would suggest that you have these 4 steps in place or these 4 best practices implemented. Based on some of the FDA guidances, we'll put together these 4. So one is certainly to submit accurate data. And we saw that big funnel in the beginning, many downstream users. Once you place and publish incorrect data into that system, and then it propagates all the way through many different users, and then you put a correction in place, you have no guarantee that it's going to affect each one of those instances of that data. So it's very hard to have the data updated by these downstream users. So the takeaway point is make sure that your data is submitted accurately right up front on the first entry. Make sure that they're current values, all fresh data, nothing obsolete, and it's a data set that you're totally happy with and meets all your quality requirements. The second practice is that the FDA, and we would certainly endorse it, that you might want to consider voluntary complying with the UDI submission. So, and also complying with UDI in general. So you might have some exceptions, and we saw some examples in previous conversation where you may not even have to submit a record based on good manufacturing practice exemption or because of a OTC exception. And again, make a business decision here whether or not this makes sense for you to go ahead and submit anyway. The third good practice is that when you do submit data, here the FDA did put out some instructions about making sure the data is full and complete. We would recommend an approach that is a comprehensive data record rather than a minimal data record. And the FDA has a number of optional and conditionally required fields, but the intent from the FDA is that if that information is available, please go ahead and submit it. They've heard from downstream users that in some cases this is very critical, and not having the information leaves gaps in their knowledge base. There's two fields in particular that the FDA has re-identified and identified them as being recommended or critical for identification and adoption, and those two would be the catalog number or the device description. So they're originally identified as being optional, and many companies just left those fields blank. Industry came back to the FDA and said, you know what, we use catalog numbers. That's really where we're mapping our products to now, and we're not sure how to relate that to the device identifier now, and this is very, very critical. Missing data here was a real shortcoming. And then responding to customer feedback and keeping up to date. So we have found that in many cases you have for marketing reason, a new packaging level, you might have a 5-pack or a 10-pack introduced to the market. They have to be identified with device identifier and reported, so there's ongoing maintenance there. You might have a contact phone number change or something, or your GMDN code might have changed. That sometimes that particular codes gets broken down into more granular subcodes, so your original code's no longer necessary. And if you pull a device off the market, end of life sort of thing, you do have to report that date. So there's ongoing maintenance as well. I won't go into all the details here, looking at the time, but this chart identifies various scenarios on the left-hand side if you have to submit a new record or if you have to change a record or retire a record. There's some deadlines of when each of those particular events need to occur. Basically, FDA wants to make sure that is promptly addressed. And Linda, do you want to just quickly summarize the product, the single source for medical device product?
Absolutely, Gary. So we're very purposeful in the way we designed our medical device, our single source for medical device product, to really address the many UDI challenges that manufacturers are facing with data management and submission of their data to the different health authorities around the world. So it starts with, many organizations that we worked with, very few had all of their data in one, place. It was, it's often housed in disparate places throughout their organization. So we are able to load that information into the single source system using either an Excel template or XML file or even API integration. But once you load the information into the system on all the different data attributes, we're able to take information from different locations and combine them into one or merge them into one complete file. And we're able to make minor transformations and then, most importantly, validate that information against the business rules so that when you're ready to submit that information, we can identify if there are any data preparation issues. If there are, and there's a reason that they would fail submission to the health authority, we're able to be very granular right down to the data attribute to determine what is the issue with why that might fail. Therefore, you're able to easily make the correction on your source document would be ideal. This way, what's in your source, you could then re-upload it into ReTech, and then when you're submitting it to the health authority, everything is in balance, and you know that all the information is up to date. Now, from there, we will package it up in whatever is required. Now we're talking about the FDA today, but as you can see, we can submit data from a single source, all from one platform, simultaneously into the FDA, the EU, China, and South Korea, soon to include Australia and Saudi Arabia. Additionally, then, once you submit that information, now you're given the acknowledgements and the audit trail so that you can really, provide a strong proof of compliance. Additionally, if for any reason you are asked to supply information to commercial downstream users, we do offer GDSN commercial syndication as another option, which we could talk about if you have any questions at a later time. Just reach out to us.
All right, thanks, Linda. That's a good overview of how we sit between manufacturers and health authorities and ease the pain. There's a couple needs. We'll just summarize here near the end of the presentation. The needs that you have and how they are met by the product and solution that Linda just described. We have found that this is a new topic, especially for the Class 1s coming on board. There's a huge learning curve. Those that were manufacturing Class 3s and 2s, you went through this learning curve way back when, and it's the same education and challenge of understanding what's going on. We here at RETEC have been involved with UDI since the inception, so we have a lot of, very fortunate to have a number of clients and submitted tons of data, over 8,000 records. A second major need there is, especially with the timing of the Class 1s being very close, this is a system that is up and running and well proven, has a lot of experience, so we can onboard customers very quickly and get them up to speed. And once that's up and running, you have 24/7 access, so it is able to be launched extremely fast. And then with this particular topic, education and support is very valuable. So we do package a lot of that training, the subject matter expertise, and provide other information for your use, and be able to make sure that each member of your staff that has this interface and connection with the UDI needs to be totally educated in what the requirements are and how they go about complying. Speaking of compliance, this system adheres to the technical requirements of the Code of Federal Regulations 21 Part 11, as well as the European Union Annex 11. So all those storage requirements and retention requirements, we're able to meet all those, as well as the audit trail. We have found over the years with the many different clients that we work with that not one system fits all. So your particular scenario and the way you process data and the way you want to implement it is different than the one that we just did yesterday. So we are very flexible in the way that you can engage RETEC. We have some ways in which you can approach it as an outsource model. There's ways in which you can basically log in and approach it as a do-it-yourself model. Number of different options there. Transferring data, shuffling data back and forth between the systems is very easily able to be configured for your best scenario, and the way you approve data and submit it, basically handling the workflow. And lastly, you have some needs in regarding data management, making sure that data is clean and validated, cleansed, making sure that this is a single source of information. It's a trusted source, it's controlled, there's governance around it, and individual users have permissions and so on. And it does work externally from your system. So there's links that can be put to your system to have it automated machine to machine, but there's no software that needs to be installed locally on your platform. So that makes the startup very quick, and the separation actually has some additional advantages. And with that, Sam, I think we're near the top of the hour. So do you want to talk a little bit about the education and actually an upcoming webinar?
Sure. All of our resources can be found at retech.com. You can follow us here. You see the links. We'll have all of these in our deck that we send out to you. And then we do have an upcoming webinar. Gary, if you don't mind, thank you. If you want to learn more about the Vision Council response to the FDA Class I announcement, join us next Tuesday. A link to register will be in the recording webinar deck email that comes out later today. And I think, do we have time for one question, or are we good? Gary, do you think?
So, Sam, I just want to make a quick comment. This webinar, I believe, please confirm, it's open for to the public. So if you make eyewear and are not a member, you're still able to attend. Is that right?
That is absolutely correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. All right. Yeah. Let's try to do one question for those that are able to hang on for another couple minutes.
Okay. And as you saw in the notes, we will be responding individually if we don't get to you right now. So my question is, what must be done to prepare and submit UDI information to the Good ID by December 8th, 2022?
Wow, I think I'd follow some of the guidelines that Linda put in place there. There is another pretty detailed version of that would be glad to share with you. You can contact us and we'll go through some steps about creating a UDI system. And there's a number of aspects, you know, those 5 field or 5 steps are developed much more detailed. And preparing the team, understanding what you have to do, and then going about making sure you have a platform in place. In parallel, if you don't already have an account, I would highly recommend you create an FDA account. And if you're going to be submitting electronically, there's a second step to do some testing. If you engage ReadTech, we take care of that and do that for you. So preparing data and getting it together. The longest task, Linda, I think that you showed there and we've seen is collecting and cleansing data. The actual submission, if you're doing electronic submission, at least is a selection and push button and it happens, you know, minutes. But that is the result of weeks and weeks of collection efforts. Now, if you're doing manual entry, then you have another issue. You have all the time and effort to manually submit the data and check it. Usually people will, or manufacturers will have another set of eyes, like a quality check. So the QA on that is some additional effort and time. Typically there's like 3% errors in transcription data. So if you want to make sure that your values are correct, you'll need to check them. So there's some extra effort and time and direct internal cost when you do manual entry. Electronic submissions go through with the data unchanged, so that has some advantages there. But those are some things that I would suggest. Linda, why don't you jump in there with a quick comment?
No, you're absolutely spot on. I mean, I think that that's the critical piece, especially if you haven't collected this information or you may have some missing items, and that might require you to go throughout your organization to find that information, and sometimes even outside your organization. So absolutely, we can help you if you're, give us a call. We're happy to help if you want to, we could define the goals and or support you in getting this done within the tight time frame.
All right, very good.
All right, well, we're a little over time, so thank you so much for joining us today. For more information, go to www.readtech.com or contact us using the phone number or email listed here. So I have a wonderful day, and thank you all to our panelists and all of you for joining in. I hope to see you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye now.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.